The night sky burned in red and white fire. A Terran starfighter fell through the atmosphere of an unknown planet, leaving a long trail of smoke behind it. Inside, Captain Aaron Hale fought to keep the controls steady. But his systems were failing fast. Engines screamed, alarms flashed, and his oxygen level dropped to critical. He whispered to himself, trying to stay calm. Just one more minute, come on. But the ship hit the ground with a violent crash, metal twisting and breaking apart. When the smoke cleared, Aaron was alive, but barely. He crawled out from the wreck, coughing and bleeding, his leg injured. His helmet cracked. Around him, strange blue plants glowed softly in the dark, and tall, crystal-like trees shimmered under twin moons. The air was thick but breathable, and somewhere far away he could hear movement. He reached for his sidearm, his training reminding him that not every world was friendly. But before he could aim, small figures appeared at the edge of the trees. They were not soldiers, not enemies, but something else entirely, tall and thin, with pale silver skin and large kind eyes. The creatures looked both fragile and graceful. They spoke in soft tones, and though Aaron could not understand their words, he could hear concern in their voices. When he fell unconscious, they lifted him carefully and carried him through the forest. For days, he drifted in and out of sleep, seeing flashes of gentle faces, glowing lights, and strange medicine. He felt warmth, care, and safety, feelings he hadn't known since the war. When he finally woke fully, he found himself inside a crystal chamber that shone with soft light. The beings introduced themselves through gestures and a translator device, calling themselves the Valari. They told him he had crashed near their village, and that they had saved him from the cold and from wild beasts. Aaron thanked them, his voice weak but sincere. He learned that the Valari were a peaceful race. Artists and healers who avoided all wars. They had heard of humans before, warriors, explorers, conquerors, and they feared them. But seeing Aaron broken and alone, they had chosen mercy instead of fear. Over the next weeks, Aaron healed slowly. He told the Valari stories of Earth, of oceans and mountains, of laughter and music. In return, they taught him about their world, how they grew living crystals and sang to heal wounds. He began to admire them deeply, and they began to see that not all humans were dangerous. One night under the twin moons, Aaron sat beside an old Valari elder named Elenai. She asked him softly, "Will your people ever come here?" Aaron smiled sadly. "Maybe not soon," he said, "but if they do, I hope they come in peace." When rescue finally came, a Terran patrol ship picked up the faint signal from his crashed vessel. Before leaving, Aaron stood before the Valari and promised them something. He gave Elenai a small beacon device, a communication link to the Terran fleet. "If you ever need help," he said, "send a signal through this beacon, and we will come." The Valari bowed their heads, not fully understanding the promise. Aaron saluted them with respect before stepping into the transport shuttle as it rose into the sky. He looked down at the glowing forest one last time. He whispered quietly, "You saved me when you didn't have to." Then, his ship vanished into the stars, leaving behind only a memory that would one day return, with fire. And with honor, many years passed. The Valari world, once quiet and hidden, stayed untouched by war or greed. Generations came and went, and the story of the human who fell from the sky became a legend among them. Children whispered about him, calling him the Fire Traveler, the one who came from the stars. The elders told how their kindness saved him, and how he promised to return if they ever needed help. But over time, even that promise began to fade like an old song carried by the wind. The Valari had no enemies, at least not until the Tsar Dominion arrived. The Tsar were a vast and cruel empire that spread across the stars like a storm. They conquered worlds, enslaved races, and destroyed any who resisted. They valued only power, and mercy was unknown to them. When their ships entered Valari space, the sky darkened for the first time in centuries. The peaceful people of the crystals had no armies, no weapons, no fleets. They tried to speak to the Tsar envoys, offering peace and trade, but the Tsar laughed, calling them weak and unworthy of existence. The Valari Council gathered in fear. Among them was Sira, the granddaughter of Elder Elenai, the same Elenai who once saved the human pilot. Sira had grown up hearing the story of Aaron Hale. She often visited the old temple where the ancient beacon still rested in a crystal case. Her grandmother had told her, "This is a promise between our kind and the stars." Now, as fire lit the horizon and the Tsar fleets moved closer, Sira looked at the beacon and wondered if the promise still meant anything. Her people debated. Some said, "Humans are gone. They will never hear us." Others said, "Even if they do, they will not care for us." But Sira refused to believe that. She remembered the kindness in the old human's eyes, the way he had spoken about honor and loyalty. She believed that humans were not like the Tsar. They kept their word. So, while the council hesitated, she made a decision that would change everything. Under the cover of night, she entered the temple. The beacon glowed faintly, its light flickering after many decades of silence. She brushed away the dust and whispered, "If you can still hear us, please, we need you." Her trembling hands pressed the activation switch. The beacon came alive, sending out a pulse of blue light that climbed through the atmosphere, breaking into the stars. It repeated the same message again and again in ancient Terran code. "We helped one of you. Please help us now." For hours, Sira waited in silence, staring at the sky. No answer came, only the sound of distant thunder as Tsar ships entered orbit. The Valari shields were weak, and the first bombardment began soon after. Explosions tore through crystal towers, and the peaceful songs of the Valari turned into cries of fear. Sira's heart broke as she watched her people run for shelter. She whispered again, "Please, someone hear us!" And then, just before dawn, the beacon pulsed once more. Its blue light grew brighter, and a faint voice echoed through the chamber. It was mechanical at first, distorted by distance and static. But then came words clear and strong. "This is Terran Command." "Signal received." Sira froze, tears filling her eyes. She whispered, "They heard us." After all this time, they heard us. Far away, across thousands of light years, the human promise had awakened, and humanity was listening. Deep in the heart of Terran space, the night was quiet. In the great command center orbiting Earth, long-range scanners kept watching the endless dark. For decades, nothing unusual had happened. Only the same signals and trade routes repeating every day. Then one night, a young technician named Lena Ward noticed something strange on her screen. A faint pulse, old and weak, repeating every few seconds. At first, she thought it was interference or an old satellite echo. But when she zoomed in, the signal code made her heart stop for a moment. It was Terran, but not from any known fleet. It carried an ancient encryption, one that had not been used for over 70 years. The message repeated slowly, and when the translation came through, the whole room fell silent. "We helped one of you? Please help us now," Lena called her supervisor. And within minutes, the entire command floor was active. Old files were opened, dusty archives pulled from deep storage. And then they found it, the record of Captain Aaron Hale, a pilot lost near the Valari system decades ago. As they read the report, an eerie quiet filled the room. He had mentioned a peaceful alien race who saved his life. He had left behind a beacon and promised them help if they ever needed it. No one believed the story back then. It was marked as personal note. Not official mission data, but now the impossible had happened. The beacon had called back, and humanity had heard it. When the message reached the Terran High Command, the admirals argued for hours. Some said, "We cannot risk a war for an old story." Others said, "It's a trap, a trick from another empire." But among the fleets, the story spread like wildfire. Across battle cruisers, mining ships, and deep space stations, people began whispering, "They once helped one of us, and now they're asking for help." Without waiting for any order, the captains began to move, one by one. Terran ships changed course toward the outer rim, toward the Valari system. No command, no politics, only duty and honor. The message spread across the fleet networks, echoed through the colonies. Every Terran officer knew the old saying from Earth's ancient code, "No debt of kindness is ever forgotten," Admiral Reyes, commander of the Fifth Fleet, stood before his bridge window, watching the stars shift as his flagship prepared for jump. He had read the old report of Aaron Hale when he was a cadet. He turned to his crew and said quietly, "He made a promise, and now we will keep it." The bridge crew saluted him silently. Moments later, the massive ship TNS Resolute vanished into hyperspace, its engines burning blue across the void. Behind it, hundreds more followed, destroyers, carriers, frigates, all answering the same silent call. Across the galaxy, human colonies began to send volunteers. Pilots, engineers, medics, everyone wanted to be part of the mission. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it deep inside. This was not just another rescue, it was a return of honor. It was proof that humanity had not forgotten who they were. On the Valari world, the skies still burned with enemy fire. Sira stood by the ancient beacon, her people hiding in caves, her heart filled with fear and fading hope. But somewhere far beyond her sky, the Terran fleets were on their way. Their ships cut through hyperspace like falling stars, unstoppable and bright. The message that began as a whisper of desperation had become a roar of engines and light. Humanity was coming, and this time they would not come alone. They would come with fire and honor. The Valari world trembled under fire. The Tsar Dominion had come in full strength, their ships covering the sky like a storm of iron and flame. Explosions filled the horizon as crystal towers shattered into dust. Valari cities, once glowing with soft light and music, were now burning. Sira ran through the streets helping the wounded, her hands trembling but her heart strong. The elders prayed inside the great temple, their voices drowned by the roar of warships above. The Tsar soldiers landed armored and cruel, their voices full of mockery and hate. They shouted that the Valari would become slaves of the Dominion. Sira tried to hide the children, guiding them through tunnels under the temple. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. "One day, the stars will remember us." She looked up at the sky through the smoke, hoping for a miracle, but none came, only more fire. The Valari defense shields flickered weakly, unable to stop the bombardment. The ground shook again and again, and the air was thick with dust and despair. Sira's friend Kalen, one of the last temple guards, turned to her and whispered, "It's over." She refused to believe that. "No," she said. "They heard us. I know they did." But even as she spoke, the last power cells of the city's shield burned out. The Tsar commander gave the final order to destroy everything. And then the sky changed. The clouds twisted as if something powerful was breaking through the heavens. A deep vibration rolled across the land, followed by a flash of light that blinded everyone for a moment. The Tsar ships stopped firing, their sensors screaming with new readings. High above the planet, space itself rippled. And out of hyperspace came the first Terran warship, its hull shining like silver fire. The insignia of the Terran Federation glowed proudly on its side. Within seconds, dozens more appeared, then hundreds. The black void filled with ships of all sizes, carriers, cruisers, and frigates, forming a massive wall across the stars. The lead ship opened a channel, and a deep, calm voice echoed through every frequency. "This is the Terran fleet. You have attacked those under our protection. Stand down immediately or face destruction." For the first time, the Tsar commander hesitated. He shouted orders, trying to form a counterattack. But the Terrans were already moving. From orbit, bright blue beams cut through the dark like blades of justice. The first volley struck the Tsar capital ship. Tearing it apart in a single hit, the explosion lit up the sky. And the Valari looked up in shock and hope. Sira's eyes widened as she saw streaks of fire across the stars. Terran fighters diving into the atmosphere. The humans had come, and they had come with fire. Tsar ships tried to fight back. But they were outmatched. Terran railguns thundered. Plasma bursts split the air, and missiles tracked every enemy craft. The battlefield became a storm of light for every Valari cry of fear. A human answer came in the form of protection and strength. In the temple courtyard, Sira watched as Terran soldiers descended from dropships in shining armor. They formed shields around the Valari, covering them from enemy blasts. Their leader, a tall woman with a scar across her face, shouted, "Stay behind us! We've got you." The Valari had never seen anything like it. The humans fought with precision, discipline, and purpose, not for conquest, but for rescue. Each step they took pushed the Tsar invaders back toward their ships. In the distance, Terran dreadnoughts opened fire again, their power shaking the mountains. Within hours, the entire tide of war had turned. The Valari, once helpless, were now shielded by the same species they once saved. The promise made long ago by one lost human had been kept, and now the stars themselves burned in witness. The sky over the Valari world burned with light. The Terran fleet filled the heavens like a storm of steel and fire. The Tsar Dominion tried to fight back, but their ships were breaking apart one after another. For every Tsar cruiser that fired, 10 Terran warships answered with precision and fury. But this was not blind destruction, it was control. Strategy and honor, Admiral Reyes, commander of the Terran fleet, stood on the bridge of his flagship, TNS Resolute. The calm blue light of the screens reflected in his eyes as he watched the battle unfold. "Keep all fire away from civilian zones," he ordered firmly. "Protect the cities first. Strike only when targets are confirmed." His voice was steady, but every word carried the weight of generations of promise. On the surface, Terran Marines moved through the ruined streets. Their armor glowed under the smoke-filled sky. Their steps heavy but sure, they carried the wounded Valari to safety. Sharing food, water, and medicine, Sira watched them in awe. Humans, powerful and fierce, yet gentle and kind, she saw a soldier lift a fallen child with care. His voice soft despite the battle raging nearby. "You're safe now, little one," he said. Placing the child in her arms, the Valari had never seen war. But they saw something stronger than fear that day. They saw courage. The Terrans fought not for glory, not for conquest, but for the promise of one man who had once fallen from the sky. Sira remembered her grandmother's story, of Aaron Hale and his words, "If you ever need help, call us." And now she understood what those words truly meant. Above the planet, the battle reached its peak. The Tsar flagship charged its main weapon, a beam capable of wiping out an entire city. The Terran fleet detected the energy surge immediately. Admiral Reyes clenched his fists. "Target their command ship," he ordered. Within seconds, the Resolute's massive rail cannons rotated into position. The first shot ripped through the void, followed by 2 more. The impact was like thunder across the stars, and the Tsar flagship exploded in a blaze of orange and blue fire. The entire Dominion fleet began to fall apart, their formations breaking, their courage gone. The remaining Tsar ships tried to escape, but the Terrans gave them a choice. "Withdraw and never return," Reyes transmitted. His voice cold as iron, those who refused were destroyed instantly. Those who surrendered were allowed to flee, broken and humbled. On the ground, the sounds of battle began to fade. The Terran soldiers helped rebuild the Valari shelters, setting up med tents and power units. When Sira met Admiral Reyes for the first time, she bowed deeply, tears in her eyes. "Your people came for us," she said softly. "You could have ignored our call." Reyes smiled faintly. "A long time ago, one of ours made a promise to your people." He looked toward the horizon where smoke still rose. "We don't break promises. For the Valari." That day became more than survival. It became a lesson. They learned that humans, despite their power and their fierce nature, carried hearts of loyalty and honor. They fought like storms but protected like guardians. The Battle of Valar Prime ended in just one night, but its story would echo for centuries as dawn broke. The first sunlight touched the ruins of the Crystal City. Terran flags stood beside Valari symbols. Both waving in the soft wind, Sira stood beside Reyes. Watching the golden light fill the sky, she whispered, "My grandmother once said the stars remember kindness." Reyes nodded slowly. "And humanity remembers those who show it." The Terrans had come with fire, but they had fought with honor. And in that union of fire and mercy, a new bond between 2 species was born. The war was over. The skies above the Valari world were calm again, filled with the silent shadows of Terran ships standing guard. The smoke of battle had faded, and the air carried the scent of rain and rebuilding. For the first time in weeks, there was peace. Sira walked among the ruins of her city, her steps slow but full of hope. Everywhere she looked, she saw humans and Valari working together. Terran engineers used their machines to rebuild the broken towers, while Valari healers treated the wounded soldiers with crystal light. They did not speak the same language perfectly, but their hearts understood one another. It was not just survival anymore, it was unity. At the center of the city stood the ancient temple. Damaged but still standing, inside the old beacon still glowed softly, its blue light flickering gently like a heartbeat. Sira often came there to sit in silence, remembering her grandmother's words. She knew this place was where it all began, the kindness of one man, the promise that had crossed the stars. Now that promise had been fulfilled one evening. As the sun set over the crystal plains, Admiral Reyes visited the temple. His uniform was worn, his eyes tired, but his presence was calm and strong. He found Sira kneeling beside the beacon, her hands resting on its base. When she saw him, she stood and bowed her head respectfully. "Admiral," she said softly. "My people owe your kind everything." Reyes shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "This debt was already paid long ago." He walked closer and placed a small metal case on the altar. Inside was a photo of a young Terran pilot in an old flight suit. His nameplate read Aaron Hale. Sira looked at it in wonder. "He was real," she whispered. Reyes nodded. "He was the first to meet your people. The one you saved when you had no reason to." He touched the beacon gently. Outside, a group of Terran Marines stood in silence as a new monument was raised. It was built from Valari crystal mixed with Terran steel, shining with both blue and silver light. At its base, two symbols were carved. The Terran Federation star and the Valari spiral joined together. Beneath them were the words, "Kindness echoes forever among the stars." When Sira read the inscription, tears filled her eyes. That night, a ceremony took place under the open sky. Valari singers filled the air with soft songs, their voices blending with Terran instruments. Children from both worlds released small glowing spheres into the air, each one carrying a message of peace. The light of hundreds of spheres rose high, drifting toward the stars where Aaron Hale once vanished. It was a night of healing, of remembrance, and of new beginnings. Admiral Reyes watched the lights fade into the distance. He turned to Sira and said quietly, "You gave us something rare. A reminder of who we are." Sira smiled faintly. "And you gave us something greater, a reason to believe again." They stood in silence for a long moment. Two worlds united not by power but by honor. When dawn arrived, the Terran fleet began to prepare for departure. The Valari gathered at the city gates, watching as massive ships lifted slowly into the sky. Sira placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "We will never forget." The admiral saluted her one last time before boarding his ship. As the engines roared and the fleet ascended, sunlight glimmered off their hulls like golden fire far above the planet. The TNS Resolute turned toward the stars, on its bridge. Reyes looked at the empty seat beside him, the seat once meant for Captain Hale. He smiled quietly and whispered, "The debt is paid, old friend." And with that, the Terran fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a world reborn, a world saved not by weapons alone, but by a promise kept. Years passed. The story of the Valari and the humans spread across the stars. What began as one desperate signal became a legend told in every Terran academy, every colony, and every starport. They called it the Call, the moment when humanity proved that honor and compassion could travel farther than any weapon. Children grew up learning about the promise of Captain Aaron Hale. Teachers told how one act of kindness, long forgotten by most, had changed the fate of two entire civilizations. The Valari became close allies of the Terran Federation, their song crystals powering new technologies, and in every joint city built between humans and Valari, a statue stood, a human and a Valari hand reaching out toward each other. Generations later, Sira became an ambassador to the Terran Council. Her voice was soft, but carried the weight of her people's history. She often told the story to young cadets. "When you look at the stars," she would say, "remember that every light you see is a promise waiting to be kept." Her words became a motto for the fleet, engraved on the walls of the new Terran Academy. We protect those who once protected us. Across the galaxy, explorers and soldiers alike carried that saying in their hearts. No Terran captain ever ignored a distress signal again. Every time a faint message echoed through the void, every time someone whispered for help, the humans listened. They remembered the Valari call and they answered. In one of the great Terran museums, there was a hall called the Chamber of Promises. At its center stood the old beacon, the very one Sira had reactivated that night under fire. It still glowed softly with its blue light, preserved inside a crystal case. Beside it lay the photograph of Aaron Hale, smiling as if he knew what his promise would become. Visitors from every world came to see it, some leaving small notes of thanks, and sometimes, if you stood quietly enough, you could almost hear a faint voice from the speakers repeating the message that started it all. We helped one of you, please help us now. Outside that hall, a group of young Terran cadets stood in formation, preparing for their first mission. Their commander addressed them firmly. You are Terrans, he said. And Terrans, remember, if the call ever comes again, you will answer it not because of orders, but because it's who we are. The cadets saluted with pride, their faces lit by the soft glow of the beacon inside. They didn't just serve a fleet, they carried a legacy, far away, on the Valari homeworld. The sky was peaceful once more. The cities had grown brighter, filled with both human technology and Valari beauty. At the top of the great temple, Sira stood one last time beside the beacon's twin crystal. Her hair had turned silver, her eyes calm but full of light. She whispered softly to the stars, Thank you, Aaron Hale. Your promise became our future. As night fell, the sky shimmered with the light of Terran patrol ships moving quietly across orbit. Their blue engines reflected on the crystal towers like eternal guardians watching over their friends. The galaxy had changed, but one truth remained the same. Kindness never dies. It travels, it waits, and when the time comes, it returns stronger than before, and somewhere in the distant stars, where no map reached and no fleet had gone, a faint new signal blinked into existence, calling for help lost and alone on a Terran flagship. A young officer looked at his screen and smiled. Sir, he said, we're picking up a distress call. The captain turned toward him, his voice calm but proud. Then set a course, he said, and let's answer it, because once again, as it had always been, humanity was listening. And this time, too, they would answer with fire and honor,